Welcome to Early Adoptr, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess, marketing exec by day, AI experimenter by day, night, and basically every other waking moment in between at this point.
And I'm Kyle, your resident tech guru. I've spent the last decade building data systems, products, and AI tools that solve real world problems. Each week, we'll break down AI concepts, tools, or trends that actually matter for your business.
So whether you're a small business owner, an entrepreneur, or you're just tech curious, let's dive in. Just think of us as your guides through the wild, wonderful, and sometimes completely overwhelming world of AI.
This is Early Adoptr.
Welcome back to Early Adoptr, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess.
And I'm Kyle. So, Jess, how's your week been?
So, Kyle, so last week we were talking about sports, specifically baseball, and I'm afraid I have to apologize to all residents of the city of Seattle because I think I may have jinxed the Mariners. For those of us who are not in the know, the Mariners made it to the playoffs for the first time since like 2001. My brother is a hardcore Mariners fan. Kyle and I had a little bit of a chat about the Mariners and their chances of making it.
Them.
I know. We talked about their chances of making it to the World Series, and I think maybe 2 or 3 days later they lost the game that would have sent them to the World Series, and obviously
in spectacular fashion, by the way.
In a truly, tough. I mean, typical Mariners, they always fall at the last hurdle, which I did feel. I felt terrible about it, so I actually cut it out of the episode.
you didn't want people to know that you were the one who jinxed him for all time.
Exactly. So I apologize to all Mariners fans out there. I'm really sorry, guys. It may have been me that did it. Actually, it was the Mariners because this is what they always do.
Yeah, it's only superstitious if it doesn't work, right? Or
exactly.
Like
I especially apologize to my poor brother, who is such a hardcore Mariners fan, and they fell at the final hurdle.
Well,
sorry, guys.
Sorry to hear that.
I know. How's your week been?
Yeah, I don't really have much to report. I have run out of cold brew again, which just is a never-ending, self-defeating cycle.
We really need to have a conversation about your ability to plan things in advance and order cold brew.
I think the problem is I just can't make it in big enough batches. You are
just that much of a caffeine addict.
If anyone were to go to analyze how much coffee I consume, they would be, disgusted is probably the best word. But
I can't believe you don't get withdrawal headaches. I get such terrible withdrawal headaches when I drink.
I'm sure coffee. I would, but when would when would that happen? When I
just never allow that to happen.
Just cold, lining coffee constantly. So yeah, I'm
okay.
Sure it
well,
could happen.
Yeah, you better make some more this afternoon, or you're going to be in a world of pain tomorrow.
Agreed. I'll get there.
Yeah. Okay, before we get started, I just want to flag that we really appreciate all of our listeners because we are coming up on our 25th episode next week. And I just really wanted to please request that all of our dedicated listeners go out and rate and review the podcast on your podcast platform of choice. It would really, really help us out. And we appreciate all of you.
Smart that we put that at the beginning this time. We usually put it
I did that intentionally because I knew I'd forget.
And now the audience has no excuse. They didn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, Jess. So let's get into it. We have some good developments this time, and I get a lot of. I know I get a lot of questions sometimes, like how do we come up with the topics? And I think we're heading into a world where we've laid a lot of the educational groundwork. If you're curious about AI, go back to some of our earlier episodes around prompt engineering and all that stuff. But this week, we kind of are sticking with, and this is maybe what we're going to kind of do going forward is as stuff comes out into the world, we will address it and try to talk about it. So today, what we're talking about is very timely. We're going to talk about AI browsers. And this was mostly inspired by Atlas, which is OpenAI's new browser, which launched this week and sent some shockwaves through the tech world. And I think, but I don't know that we should be too surprised. We've talked about how OpenAI is becoming an operating system.
Yeah, definitely.
So, this you probably could have put your philosophizer or,
no one I think was shocked by it, but it always is going to cause a ripple effect, I think.
Well, Ripple indeed. Google stock dropped like 3 or 5% or something like that, but in one day. So obviously it felt.
You got to remember that Google owns Chrome, which has been the go-to browser for years. So this is a pretty big threat to them. We'll kind of get into that a little bit later. But this browser is actually quite different from Chrome and kind of the traditional browsers that we've been used to. I think a lot of people heard the term new browser and just thought, oh, okay, it's just another like Chrome, clone of Chrome. Try saying that 3 times fast. But this is actually quite different. And really what we're going to get into is how this is actually more about who controls your gateway to the internet than it is just a browser. So this is actually kind of building on this 2-tier internet concept, which we are going to talk a little bit more about, I think, next week as part of our conversational commerce conversation.
Yep. And look, coming from a long time Firefox, DuckDuckGo guy, I know. I was one of those. Weird.
Oh my God.
I know. But I still think that 60 or 70% of people use Chrome. So
I do.
Obviously most people do.
Yep.
But I think what this is building towards is a little bit of a browser wars 2.0. So I don't know if you remember, we're going to date ourselves a little bit here, but we had the original browser wars in the late 90s with Netscape Navigator.
I remember it well. Yep.
Remember that back in the day came off the shelf in a lot of your computers. They basically invented the modern web browser, and they went head to head with Microsoft's Internet Explorer, which some of you might still be using that because it comes off the shelf with Windows, but hopefully not. And then, you fast forward to 2008, Google launched Chrome, and it kind of changed the game. I mean, it took over. That being said, at that time, everyone was kind of switching to, well, Google it, right? And so it was just kind of a natural progression for them to take over. But it also helped that as a product, it was massively better than Explorer. So
I mean, I think we can safely say that anything Google is going to be better than Microsoft in terms of user experience. So
that's right. And, proof in the pudding, they went from like 0 to 60% market share in a couple of years. So obviously, consumers agreed.
And for the most part, this wasn't really about who had the better browser. They're all kind of the same. Like it's the same basic concept. Although, like obviously, as we just said, Google had a slightly more user-friendly experience. But the more important part of why the browser wars were such a big deal is that it was all about controlling the gateway to the internet. So controlling how we as consumers saw the internet, and more importantly, all the data that came with that, because it's all about the data. And so now I think we're actually going to be watching something similar play out, but this time isn't just about, who's got the biggest market share of the browser usage. It's all about who powers the AI powered interface. Again, that 2-tier internet that we'll talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just start with the basics for anyone who hasn't seen the news about Atlas, or you kind of saw it but didn't really get into it. What exactly is Atlas?
Yeah, so we'll just cover some fundamentals. Atlas is OpenAI's new web browser. It's available for Mac users, and it's coming for Windows, iOS, and Android. That's an important distinction. And so I think, Jess, we both downloaded it. We'll talk about kind of our quick run at it. I think it launched on like Wednesday or Thursday. So
exactly.
But I think before we dive into Atlas specifically, we should probably explain the term AI browser, because it is a new category of product, and it's really only emerged in the last year or so.
Yeah, I would say even 6 months or so. So yeah, absolutely.
Whenever Perplexity launched Comet, right?
Exactly. And I think that distinction is really important. So like between a traditional browser and an AI browser. So a traditional browser, which is Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Internet Explorer, it's basically just a window to view web pages. So it's a pretty neutral tool. Like you just type in the URL or a search term and it shows you the results, and that's kind of it. It's just a window.
It's what we've been using since the Netscape Navigator and Internet Explorer days. The browser itself doesn't really understand what you're looking at or what you're trying to accomplish. Again, it is just that, like the rail into the internet.
Yeah. But an AI browser, on the other hand, has AI capabilities that are really baked into the core user experience. And the AI can see what you're looking at. It can understand the content. It can interact with it, and it can take actions on your behalf. So it's less like a passive window and more like having an assistant that's with you the entire time you are browsing the internet or you're online.
Really good way to put it. And as we mentioned, Atlas isn't the first AI browser. Perplexity launched their browser called Comet earlier this year, and it has a lot of similar features. They were probably the first, the pioneers of this space.
Yeah, and Comet's pretty impressive. It's got real-time web search integration. It's got AI-powered summaries, and it has a feature where it can answer questions about the page that you're on. But I think the big differentiator between these two is all about timing and distribution, because Perplexity has maybe a couple of million users. Like, I use it, but mostly for research. OpenAI has 800 million weekly active
Was it
users.
weekly? Yeah, weekly active users.
Weekly active users. So that is a very, very, very big difference when it comes to who can actually use it or see it.
Yeah, that's kind of the ball game right there. Think about all 800 weekly users are getting every time you log in.
800 million, not
800. Yeah, just all 800 of us, just chilling in ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly.
No, all 800 million of us just got, we're getting I don't know if you've got it, but hey, download Atlas, right? It's the cheapest advertising of all time.
It sure is.
But it's, and the difference between OpenAI releasing Atlas and Perplexity releasing Comet is the difference between a startup launching an innovative product and a massive tech giant with a massive reach launching a competitor. So like when Instagram launched Reels after TikTok, sure, TikTok did it first, but Instagram had 1 billion users they could immediately push it to. So, just very different levels of scale.
Yeah, I mean, Perplexity basically validated the market and kind of proved that people want this AI native browsing experience. And so now OpenAI comes in with this distribution to really dominate it. And also Atlas has some features that Comet doesn't have yet. So that is obviously a really key thing to mention.
I think that makes it really interesting. This isn't just Chrome with ChatGPT bolted on. It's a evolution or a reimagining of what a browser can be when AI is the central organizing principle from day one.
Yeah. So you've downloaded it and used it a little bit. I've downloaded it and actually struggled to get into it. It was kept crashing when I was logging on. So I haven't had a ton of opportunity to play around with it yet. I think our goal is to really do a little bit more of a deep dive next week. But what are your initial impressions?
I'll say, I wonder if just so much traffic they didn't really plan for.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a good point. I mean, I did eventually get on, but it took me it took me a couple tries.
Yeah, a lot of interesting points. So first off, I did notice once I logged in, it offered me the ability to stay logged out or to start browsing while I was logged in, almost like giving the user the ability to kind of test things before you start interfacing with like your ChatGPT login, which was kind of interesting. So you could kind of like
I didn't get that. I didn't get that. I wonder if that's a US versus rest of the world feature.
Could be, but it definitely there was a fork or a choice of whether I wanted to.
I definitely didn't have that. I was forced to log in. Interesting.
But I wanted to kind of start to see how it would learn my preferences over time. So I started I logged in and I started going through. One of the things that I think is really interesting is, again, talking about how we're reimagining kind of the space. When you search on Google and you have options for images and news and all of that, that was kind of a unique thing to start to separate the internet into different mediums or content. The Atlas browser has that functionality as well. So you come in and you start, and it's, text box where you would start to input your question, just like you would with ChatGPT. And as you ask that question, you can then fork down into these separate areas. So if I ask it about like what's happening in the world today, it will give me a ChatGPT-like response, but I can also start to see a news tab or an images tab or stuff like that. So that is very different from ChatGPT and your experience over there. It's similar to what Google has. And so it's kind of bringing those two user experiences together, which I thought was clever and kind of interesting. mean, maybe in some ways it's novel, but it definitely expands on what ChatGPT is doing. So that first and foremost. Then as I continued to go along, I was starting to compare it to the ChatGPT agent that we tested a couple months ago.
Which you were not impressed with that.
Exactly. And it was hard to see where that was going to go to actually improve, or where it could improve and to get to a place where it was usable. So where this is different is I can kind of start to see where this is going to go. I still think it's early days. It's still a little slow. It's still a little clunky. But as I'm watching it kind of interact and give information, as well as like interacting through different web pages, I can start to see, like, as you speed that up, as you start to give more user preference and experience, that could actually become really powerful to automate and to like be an assistant as you're going through the browsing experience. So I'm a little bit more optimistic, but I will tell people, like, set expectations low. You're going to look at it going through a web page and be like, dude, hurry it up. Like, click the button. Like, why are you taking so long? But, and not to get too techie, don't jargon,
go for it.
Buzzer me. But web pages are built off of HTML and then JavaScript, which is kind of, so HTML is like what loads when the page is there. JavaScript is more of the interactive capabilities of that web page. So you click on something and it loads something else, right? Seeing the ChatGPT browser be able to go through and understand the elements of the page and interact with the JavaScript, there's obviously like tech ways to do that, but seeing it do it on the fly actually is quite impressive. And so then to constantly be having a conversation with the user on the right side while it's going through the browser experience on the left felt very advanced. Felt like, oh, that's going to be cool.
Interesting. I would also say you're doing that with, well, we'll get into that a little bit more, but you're doing that with Pro, right? You've got a Pro subscription?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Yeah. So that's going to be the difference.
My experience.
Well, because I was going to say it changes a lot, because at the minute I'm using the free version of ChatGPT and I'm not seeing any of that. So that is something that we'll get more into, but I think that is something that we should caveat all of this with, is that if you try the free version and you are not seeing what Kyle is talking about and you're distinctly underwhelmed, that is why. So that is, it's worth flagging that. But what I think is also interesting is very clearly whatever they were doing with the agent, because again, we did a whole episode on the agent and you did not rate it in the slightest and you actually kind of hated it and gave up on it. But very clearly they were taking those learnings from the agent and putting it towards this. Like, there is no doubt in my mind that it was actually, someone put the agent into production just to kind of see how people engaged with it.
Great product research exercise.
It's the best product research exercise.
Get 100 million people to use something, record every single one of those interactions, and figure out how to improve the system. Not dumb. That is
that is not dumb. So okay, so right now it's a little clunky. We know that it's not quite there yet, but we kind of have an idea of what they're working towards. So what could that look like, in a couple months' time when things are a little bit smoother and it's a little bit more actually usable? What do we think that looks like?
So imagine you're browsing the web right now. Let's say you're researching hotels for a business trip to Berlin or New York.
Yep. I do this a lot. It's one of my least favorite things to do in the world. I find it incredibly stressful and I actually get a little overwhelmed by the whole process. So I actually genuinely hate it.
Yeah, well, this Atlas can potentially help this, right? So you effectively have ChatGPT living in a sidebar that is watching what you're looking at on any web page. So as you're searching through hotels and activities and whatnot, you can ask ChatGPT, compare these 3 hotels on price, location to the conference center, guest reviews, proximity to restaurants, or X, Y, and Z. And it's going to do it right there and start to give you answers alongside. So not copy pasting, no tab switching, just basically like a chatbot on every website where you can be asking about the content on that site, but regardless of where you are.
So this is going to be pretty transformative, I think, when they actually get it there. I think the ultimate goal is that it's going to all happen within the browser, a bit like we've been talking about with instant checkout. You can really see where kind of overall OpenAI is going with all of this. So rather than bouncing around from tab to tab to tab like you currently do, it's all happening within the browser, which is the really key thing. And I think it gets even more interesting with what they are calling browser memories.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. I think we're going to talk more about memory, but that is beginning to be a really interesting area of AI. Browser memories, and also, we're going to get into security and privacy. That's going to be a thing we got to talk about. But here's how it works. So Atlas can optionally remember context from sites you visit. So just to reiterate on that, you have complete control of this, right? And you can then reference that context later.
So as an example, say that you spent a week browsing job postings because you're hiring for a new role. You could then ask ChatGPT, find all the job postings that I looked at last week and summarize the salary ranges, required skills, common benefit packages, and all of those things. And it pulls from your browsing history to do that research. This is where people are going to freak out.
Yeah.
Guarantee it.
But let me give a devil's advocate to this, which is, I don't know if you've ever used OpenTab or any of these tools, but like I create so many tabs and then I try to save them all.
So many tabs.
And then I have tabs from like years ago that would be great to go back to, or like there was a thought or a thing, right? And I've just completely forgotten it. Now, all of that sits and I could basically get like, hey, summarize the stuff I looked at over the last week. Is there anything that I need to do based on X, Y, and Z tasks? So again, we're getting tools that I think might end up helping. I like your caveat with the guardrails and all of that, but there's some real productivity enhancements around this.
I think what's interesting is people hear the term browser memories and they immediately freak out and immediately freak out about privacy. And we will talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I actually think that if you stop to think about how you work on a weekly basis and how many times you reopen tabs, or as you say, you forget something and you want to go back to it, or you knew you read something somewhere, but you couldn't remember where you read it, all of those things. I think the reality of user behavior versus the privacy concerns, I think if people had the option, and as soon as they start experiencing this where they're like, oh yeah, I had this tab open 2 days ago and I can't remember why. I think that's actually going to start to change the behavior because people are going to get used to that pretty quickly and they're going to like it.
Yeah, I think we talk about like the assistant or the intern, right? The infinite intern. I mean, this is really starting to feel like that's true. I mean, you have someone who's taking notes on everything you've looked at and is able to recall that at a moment's notice. That's incredibly helpful.
Yeah. I think that segues nicely into the other feature that is going to be a really, really big one. Do you want to tell us about agent mode?
Yeah, so agent mode is currently locked to Plus.
So this is what you have that I don't have because you've got Plus. I don't have Plus right now.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. I do have access to that.
Exactly.
And this is where we really move from AI that answers questions to AI that performs tasks. It was what the last thing promised and failed on. And this is going to start getting us closer to. So we've been talking about this shift for months. We've talked about AI agents ad nauseum. And it's similar to ChatGPT agent that they launched a few months ago. But again, we weren't particularly impressed by that.
No. And so agent mode actually allows ChatGPT to actually do things for you while you browse. So that could be research topics across multiple sites, compare products. Eventually, I think the goal is going to be for it to be able to book appointments or fill out forms or book flights, which I know is something you were desperately trying to get the agent to do before, and it just was not working. But it's more about autonomous action, not just information retrieval. So that is key. It will go and do stuff for you rather than just saying, hey, here's that booking page for your flight.
I mean, going back to our ladder, we're actually starting to climb it to a place where it's interesting, right?
Yeah, for
so
sure.
Now we're starting to be able to give it parameters that memory that we talked about. If it remembers your preferences, like I like an aisle seat, right? It's going to always remember that. And if it can book me an aisle seat for something I'm looking for, all of these little additions and tweaks that have been added over time are starting to get us to a place of kind of that agentic future that I think starts to become really interesting.
I agree. And, from a business efficiency perspective, this is massive. So if you think about something like competitive research, normally you're going to spend hours. I mean, competitive research takes forever. You're going to be looking at competitor websites, you're going to be taking notes, you're going to be building spreadsheets, like keeping track of everything. With agent mode, you could just say, here are 5 competitors, compare their pricing tiers, their feature sets, their customer testimonials, and then summarize the key differentiators. So, and then it goes away and does the work while you can focus on other things. So from a business perspective, agent mode is actually going to be incredibly useful. It's just when they get it to that point where it's actually useful.
Yeah, I love that example. Another good one would be content research. So if you're writing a white paper, a proposal, a sales document, you could ask Atlas to find and summarize sources, pull relevant statistics, maybe look at competitor pricing, track citations as you browse. I think it just becomes a real game changer, enhancer to kind of the research process that you're doing, and now it exists outside ChatGPT.
Yeah. Or even something like customer support. So like if a customer asks about integrating your product with a specific tool that you're not very familiar with, you could ask Atlas to research that tool's API documentation. You can find other examples of integration. Like I'm working on a project right now where I was having to do some research about whether or not MailChimp can easily integrate with Outlook or Monday or, all those things. Like if I had a way of easily researching that, it would really make my life, and not just researching it, but actually give an approach to do the implementation. That would make my life so much easier.
Yeah. So these are all real practical use cases that save meaningful time. And I think as people test this more, they'll see some of the benefits. But we need to talk about the elephant in the room, as always.
As always,
And
there's always an elephant in the room with AI. Yep.
100%. We've been alluding to it, but let's get into it. So privacy and data security.
Yeah, because as we were saying, the term browser memories and just talking about the fact that AI sees everything I'm doing online is really a privacy nightmare. I can already see this butting heads up against the EU AI Act, which came into effect a couple of months ago. And, OpenAI has always been the least privacy compliant LLM. Like we are always worrying and advising about what you put into ChatGPT. So honestly, privacy is my absolute biggest concern. And I was a little concerned about using it myself. So I think we need to be really clear about what the actual risks and safeguards are when you're using this browser.
I think they learned from their own challenges, but
yeah, there are many challenges.
Yeah, but also from Microsoft's recall backlash earlier this year. So first off, browser memories are completely optional, so you can turn them off entirely. 2, and this is I think a nice bit of growth for OpenAI. They've been very transparent about it, so you can view all your browser memories in the settings, see exactly what Atlas has remembered. And then 3, which kind of builds trust with the user, it's completely controllable. So you can archive or delete any memories at any time. That being said, let's always remember, like at one point, OpenAI completely exposed people's chat history. So just be wary of that.
Yeah. So I think as always, if I'm using Atlas for work, what do I need to be careful about? Because it's similar to what we advise for just using ChatGPT in general.
Same rules that apply to any AI tool, really. So don't put confidential information, proprietary data, or anything you wouldn't want potentially exposed, because that's happened, right? We call it our New York Times test. We've talked about it before. Would you be comfortable with this being on the front page of the New York Times?
Yeah. And for businesses, as always, you need really clear policies about what can and can't be researched or discussed using Atlas. And, if you don't have an AI policy yet, it's another really big wake up call that not only do you need one, they are living, breathing documents that need to constantly be changing as new developments come out. Because, who could have anticipated this 2 months ago?
Right. And we talked about this with Sean in our episode a few months back. Your team is already using AI tools, whether you know it or not. So better to have guidelines in place than to be playing catch up after there's a problem.
Yeah. And I think my perspective on this is that Atlas isn't making AI usage more risky, right? Using ChatGPT has been risky for a while. It's just making it more visible. So there's the same privacy considerations that apply to ChatGPT or to Claude or to any other AI tool. The difference is now that it's more integrated into your browsing experience. So it's more convenient, which means that people are probably going to be using it more frequently. I think this is really going to be adopted by the mainstream even more than ChatGPT itself. So just something to bear in mind.
Well, that's a good segue to talk about the larger strategic question.
Yeah.
What does this mean for the broader tech landscape? Because as we're identifying, two-tier internet, all these different ideas, it really is so much more than just a new browser being released.
Absolutely, because we said it earlier. We know that OpenAI isn't just thinking about an LLM. They are thinking about an operating system. They're not just launching a new browser. They're really launching a direct assault on Google's entire business model. And Google had this massive drop in stock when it was announced, and that's investors pricing in this existential threat for Google. Google's really under assault on a number of fronts at the minute. There's a lot of legal action that they're involved with at the minute around their advertising business and stuff. So this is just more threat on the Google front.
Icing on the cake, as you will.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So let's break down why this matters. So how do most people access the internet? They open Chrome. What's the first thing they do? They search for something on Google. Google controls both the browser and the search engine, which means they control the gateway to the internet and the ad revenue that comes with it. I mean, look, there's a reason that for how many 20 years we've been saying Google it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we're already starting to see that instead of people searching Google, you just chat GPT it. So what then happens? Exactly. Ask chat. That is what I hear a lot as well. So if you are now asking chat in your Atlas sidebar, and then what happens if chat gives you the answer directly? So it's synthesizing information from multiple sources without ever clicking through to a website. Exactly what we were talking about earlier, where everything is happening within the browser. This is all conversational, everything. Google doesn't just lose the search traffic, they're losing the entire opportunity to serve ads. So that's their entire business model that is under threat.
This is exactly what happened in the first browser wars, just with different players. If you control the interface, you control the ecosystem. So Netscape thought they were building a browser.
It's such a blast from the past. You just forget. Actually, Ask Jeeves. I used Ask Jeeves a lot. I don't know if you remember that.
Amazing. Of course I do. Yeah. But Microsoft understood they were building the gateway to all sorts of things, but definitely digital commerce was a big one of it. And I think that's why Microsoft was willing to give Internet Explorer away for free as part of the Windows OS. So the browser wasn't the product, but it did give them a pretty big moat.
Yeah, exactly. And Google did the same thing with Chrome in the mid 2000s. Like they didn't make money directly from Chrome, but they made money from all of the search traffic and data collection, everything that Chrome enabled. So the browser was kind of more the asset that protected the core business.
I mean, what's the stat for how many years? 95% of Google's revenue was search, but all of the ecosystem contributed to that ad revenue model. So Gmail, Chrome, all of those tools that made zero money were incredibly important to, again, just driving more search and ad revenue. So now I think what's obviously really interesting, OpenAI is playing the same playbook, right? I think what a lot of people are missing is this isn't about getting everyone to switch browsers tomorrow. It's about changing what the next generation of internet users expect, or the way that we interact with the internet.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important point. Like if you're 15 years old right now and you start using Atlas, you're not going to think of Googling things the way that we do. It's you're going to think of asking your AI assistant as the default interface because that's what you're used to. It's a bit like how, I don't know, I'm going to do something visual and it's not going to work particularly well for an audio medium, but you know how like if you ask someone above a certain age what a phone is, and you traditionally put up like an old landline phone, I'm putting my thumb and my finger near my ear, versus you ask a kid and they have a flat hand to indicate a smartphone, generational.
That's so weird. That's so
I know,
crazy.
Right?
I want to, where's the generation that does the You remember
the rotary phone.
where you would
Yeah.
do the
Oh,
number and
God.
then you would let it.
Oh, God, I hated that. I had a friend growing up who had a rotary phone, and it took like 10 minutes to dial the phone. It was
My
so
grandparents had
annoying.
one. You know what? I was a very easy to entertain kid. I could just do that
You
all
just
day
played
long.
with the rotary phone all day.
100%. I think I had when I was really little, I had one of those,
Oh, yeah, the little like Fisher Price ones. Yeah, totally. I remember those.
Fisher Price. There we go.
Fisher
That's a blast from
Price.
the past. But anyway, so going back to what we're talking about, the fundamental shift in behavior, right? When that behavioral shift happens, all the strategies that businesses built around SEO, content marketing, ad placement,
Yep.
years, decades of our structure, all of that needs to be completely rethought. And that doesn't even count for the commerce side of things. And I know we're super excited about where, commerce is starting to go. And we also talked about OpenAI's instant checkout and conversational commerce, which is like a whole new term.
Which is one of my little things that I'm obsessed with right now.
Yeah, I think we're probably set to talk about that in a couple weeks in expectation of the holiday shopping season. So this behavioral shift is transformational. It's coming, and it's coming quickly.
Yeah. But I think we can't ignore poor little Perplexity in all of this, because there is one more player in the game right now. It's not just OpenAI. So let's focus on Perplexity and comment a little bit.
Yeah. And it is good for competition, right? So technically
it is good to have competition. That's true.
We do want Comet to survive. So let's talk about them a little bit. Perplexity launched Comet about 6 months ago, but with OpenAI coming in with Atlas, that has like 80% of the same features, plus some new ones, plus they have all of the scale. And oh, by the way, they can immediately, push it to those 800 million users. They're definitely, I think, a little bit under the gun.
Yeah. And, I think this is a lesson for any startup who is building in the AI space right now. If you're building something that could potentially be a feature in ChatGPT or Claude or any of the big AI platforms, you really need like a clear defensibility strategy, because these platforms can and will replicate successful features once they've been validated in the market. They're going to steal that from you, and they're not going to care. So you really need to think about that as well.
I do want to offer one caveat that we haven't really brought up, but we were talking a lot about how this AI internet is bypassing a lot of websites and how you're losing traffic as a result. What's kind of interesting about Atlas is, based on just my little bit of testing, it actually brings traffic back to the site, because it's actually, you're an individual person going to a website and it's interacting with that to book it or look at it. So I'm not saying it's going to bring back all the traffic, because if you're just asking a general question, it's just going to get that information. But if I'm actually trying to go do something on a website, book an activity or book a flight, I'm actually coming back and I'm actually going to that website and browsing it. So just a little caveat.
For now. That's going to change. That is absolutely going to change, because they've already got those rails, the agentic commerce protocol rails. They're 1000% going to build that for other forms of. So I don't know. Let's call it agentic travel protocol or whatever. For booking flights. They are totally going to build those rails.
That's
they just don't exist yet. That definitely coming.
So let's bring this back to some practical advice. If I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur listening to this, what should I do about Atlas?
So if you are a Mac user, because remember right now it's only available on Mac and everything else is coming just right now, Mac only, and you have a ChatGPT Plus or Pro subscription, download Atlas and test it for only non-confidential work. Don't use it for anything confidential. And actually, you can be like me and use it with your free version as well, just to play around with it and see what works. And then I'm sure I kind of go on and off my ChatGPT subscription depending on what I need it for. So I'm sure I'll be able to play around with it again in the future. But I think, experience how the browser memory works, experience how the agent features work, and form your own opinion based on real usage, not just the hype. But remember, do it in a privacy safe way. Think about the New York Times test at all times.
Yeah. Maybe just for personal stuff. And only you can only use the agent or browser or the agent stuff if you have the Pro. So just keep that in mind. Secondly, though, I think start thinking strategically about how AI native interfaces might change customer behavior. So if people are asking AI for recommendations instead of searching Google on kind of just a general discovery, how does that affect your SEO strategy?
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect your content strategy or your entire approach to digital marketing, really, right?
Yep.
And as we talked about a couple weeks ago, what is your answer engine your answer engine optimization, your AEO strategy?
Yeah.
That is going to be key going forward. That is only getting more and more important with a release like this.
Exactly. And, finally, or thirdly, don't panic, but don't ignore it. Atlas is definitely not going to replace Chrome overnight. It's still, like, as we've been saying, it's still a little clunky. It's not quite there yet, but it's definitely a signal of where things are headed. And, part of being an early adopter means that you understand, you understand these shifts before they become mainstream. So you start thinking about these things now.
Look, I love a shameless plug. It's all good.
I know, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And just again, one more thing, if you're not thinking about AEO optimization, how do you structure your content so AI models cite your sources? You need to get on that. So it's super important. It's the new SEO. It requires kind of an evolutionary approach it's not different per se, but you're adding on a whole new level of complexity. So we've got 2 episodes dedicated to that topic. Go back and listen to those. It should be super helpful.
So let's move on to AI news of the week. And we've got some pretty big stories that have some pretty big implications this week.
Yeah, absolutely. First one up, right on schedule. Speaking of Perplexity. So between Atlas and this story, they've not really had a great week.
No, they really haven't.
And you hate it when the little guys get beat up on.
I mean, they're kind of assholes, those. Yeah, and also they're kind of assholes about this. So what's going on?
Well, we don't know them personally, but
no, we don't know personally. No, that is true. Yeah. But they behave like assholes.
Fair enough. Well, I guess a little karma here. So Reddit is suing Perplexity, and they're also going after Oxy Labs, AWM Proxy, and SERP API for data scraping to train AI systems.
So this is basically Reddit saying, hey, you're taking all of our data, all the posts, comments, discussions, everything that users created. And we talked about it a lot, how important Reddit is for AI data training. Like it's a really key source. In fact, Google has a partnership where they pay to access that data because it is that important. But Perplexity are using it to train their AI models and build these products. Reddit wants to be compensated for that. So this is always the reason. It's not about the fact that it's happening because, like I said, they've got a partnership with Google where Google pays them for it. It's all about the compensation. They don't want their data to be used without getting paid for it, which is reasonable.
It is, but it also raises some interesting legal questions because data ownership and fair use, web scraping has been a thing forever. So Google does it, Bing does it. It's how the internet works effectively. It's how search engines have ranked websites. But there's a legal gray area around whether scraping data specifically to train AI models now crosses a line. So it's a really fine line distinction.
I still think it's reasonable. They just want to be compensated for their data. From a business perspective, Reddit has a point. They've spent years building this platform. The value of Reddit actually isn't really the technology. Like the technology is pretty shit. It's the content.
It's always been super basic.
It's always been super basic. It's basically like an old school forum, right? Yeah. From it hasn't really moved on.
4chan days.
It's I was never on 4chan.
I wasn't either.
Never even ventured into that cesspool. But it's super, super basic. But the value of Reddit is the content, the discussions, the collective knowledge. We're always saying people on Reddit know a lot about a lot of different things. If you ever have a question, someone on Reddit will have encountered that. And so now AI companies are extracting that value without compensating the platform or the users who have created it.
Well, that is the interesting part. I mean, Reddit, again, just a simple forum, all that content is really user generated. So I feel like that is the gray area. Like who owns that content?
They're not, sorry, Reddit users, you're not getting compensated. Reddit is getting compensated.
Yeah. But the users are the ones who are,
they absolutely are. But you could argue that Reddit provided them the opportunity. Yeah. So there is that.
But look, this signals a much bigger shift. And it's been a long time coming. But we're moving from an era where online data was treated as a free-for-all to an era where data licensing and ownership are going to become much more important. And we're seeing the legal battles play out as a result.
Oh, so many. I mean, look at Disney and Sora and Midjourney and, all of those things.
The examples are everywhere.
Everywhere.
I get excited about this because what I think it means is that the future of AI is really about who has access and who owns data. It's all about that context. So also, if you're a business owner and you have some proprietary or unique data, think about how to protect that, because that is going to be your IP going forward.
This actually is making me think about a project that I'm working on right now, and we're going to be pulling together an AI policy for them, and they 1000% need to be thinking about this.
Yeah, your data now, everything that you have in the past is all of a sudden going to become your defensible moat. It's going to be what only you have. And some companies, big companies, are already doing this. The New York Times has been very aggressive about protecting their content. They've sued OpenAI. The Atlantic just signed a licensing deal with OpenAI. I'm sure there was a lawsuit before that. So we're seeing the emergence of a market for high quality training data. But it first comes down to those publishers or the people with access to it protecting what they have.
Yeah, and this has implications for content strategy. We were just saying this. If high quality human created content becomes more valuable, specifically because it's high quality and human created content, which actually kind of plays into the story that we're about to talk about, that really changes the economics of content production. So just something to bear in mind.
Yeah, super interesting point. Yep. And next story. So I love this. This term has been coming up a lot in my life lately. But what we're going to talk about is LLM, large language model, brain rot or brain rotting, which
Well, that is actually the name of the research. They know how to generate headlines.
Sorry, I got excited about the term. So But let me explain what it is. So there's this new research project that's gone viral in the AI community. It's documenting something called model collapse or synthetic data collapse. And we kind of talked about this in our slop episode, but it's when you train AI models on content generated by other AI models. So just this repeating death cycle. But ultimately what happens is the quality of that model degrades over time. And I think it's becoming a real problem.
It's going to be a huge problem, especially with some of these new platforms like Sora and Vibes. And this, I know, this research is really just driving home this point, because when AI models train on AI generated content instead of human created content, they start reinforcing their own biases and their own errors. And so I think you said it last week, or when we talked about AI slop, but it's a fun description because everyone gets it. It's like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. So each generation gets a little bit fuzzier, a little bit more degraded, like a little bit worse.
Yeah. But where this matters, so there's an increasing amount of AI generated content flooding the internet right now. Blog posts written by AI, social media written by AI, LinkedIn posts, shitty reviews, product descriptions, a lot of news articles, the Sora videos everywhere.
Yep.
And we know that kind of generated content is being used to train models. So if future AI models train on that content, we're looking at a gradual decline in quality and accuracy across the board.
I'm going to use my favorite phrase for this. It's like a snake eating its own tail. It's an Ouroboros. It's a self-reinforcing cycle. And this is actually the reason why OpenAI, Anthropic, all of the large language models are making these licensing deals with publishers like The Atlantic, Fox, Financial Times. It's why Perplexity is scraping Reddit, because Reddit's constantly got new human-generated content, but they need that high-quality human-generated content to keep their models from degrading. So that's why you're going to start to see more and more of these licensing deals.
Totally. So the takeaway here, as we kind of discussed, is if you're creating content, make it genuinely valuable, distinctly human. Make sure you keep or you have your own unique perspective. We actually got a great shout out, and I'm going to shout out to Luana, who's a friend of mine.
That's right.
Who we worked with in the past. She was talking about her strategy for basically outlining or talking about what she wants, and then having AI kind of help her structure it and kind of add in information. That is a perfect example of what we're talking about. So that's going to be what's good for the user experience. Otherwise, if you're just saying, hey, create something for me and throwing it out in the world. You're just adding to the overall broader problem of model degradation.
Quality over quantity. More than ever, it matters.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. It's time for our favorite segment, AI Gone Wrong. And this week, our story comes from South Korea, and it is a masterclass in how not to deploy AI in, I don't know if I would say high stakes environment, but, pretty important environments where you want to make sure that you get it right. And they did not.
Yeah. It's amazing how many of our AI gone wrong stories are happening in education. I don't know.
I think speed, they're just trying to roll things out, and it's just not working. I think they're trying to get ahead of things, and they don't do it in a way that, anyway, let's get into it so people know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and this one is particularly frustrating, I think, as we look at all of these stories, because we just see it as avoidable. South Korea rolled out AI-generated textbooks, and they actually did this in March. It was for math, English, and computer science. And so the government spent $850 million on the program. The publishers invested another $567 million developing the textbooks. So not an inconsequential sum of money. And it was a flagship initiative, heavily promoted as like the future of education. They were leading us into the future.
Yeah. And I mean, on the surface, it sounds really compelling. So it's personalized learning for each student, reduced inequality between urban and rural schools, which is a real problem, lighter workload for teachers, like bless the teachers, all the right buzzwords. And then the actual practical reality hit.
So after just 4 months, or, one semester in educational terms, forget those days, good times.
I know.
The textbooks were stripped of their official status and downgraded to supplementary materials. Adoption dropped from 37% of schools to 90%, which that's a pretty big failure. That's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, so the problems were immediate and obvious. Students reported technical issues that delayed classes. They had difficulty staying focused on individual laptops and lessons that weren't actually personalized to their level, despite that actually being the main selling point. So teachers also found factual inaccuracies in the content, and parents raised concerns about data privacy and increased screen time because they're trying to get kids off screen, not give them more time.
Absolutely. And I think what really gets me is this wasn't caught in testing because they didn't do adequate testing. This is the part to me
killer.
That's frustrating.
This is the most ridiculous part about all of this.
Yeah. So in South Korea, traditional print textbooks take about 18 months to develop. They'll review those for 9 months and then take about 6 months to prepare. So decent cycle, but a lot of people with eyes on. The AI textbooks took 12 months, 3 months, and 3 months respectively. So effectively, they rushed it. And you're talking about rushing an entirely new process. So that other process had been developed over years, right? So it just feels like they rushed it.
Yeah. And I think one lawmaker actually asked, since they target children, they require careful verification and careful procedures. Why was it rushed? I mean, of anything, this should not have been rushed. And that's really the question.
And unsurprisingly, it got politicized very quickly. The Korean Teachers Union and civic groups sued the education minister, saying the program made AI textbooks mandatory without adequate safeguards.
And so now you have publishing companies that are planning lawsuits for financial damages because the government really pulled the rug out from underneath them. These are the textbook publishing companies. Teachers and students are divided. So some of them did actually find it useful. So there were some benefits, but others really thought the quality was terrible. And most importantly, a lot of students had their entire education disrupted for a semester.
This is exactly the sort of high-profile failure that causes trust issues that we discussed last episode. We're going to see more of these failures as AI gets deployed in more, high to medium stakes environments, like the dawn is, or the night is darkest before the dawn, or whatever the saying is, right?
Yeah.
And also a big part of this, which I think a big part of this issue is the pressure to adopt AI quickly is really intense. There's political pressure, there's competitive pressure, investor pressure. I mean, how many times do you hear from a board like, oh, we have to use AI? I hear that a lot. So, but the important bit, speed without safeguards, without those guardrails, leads to what happened in South Korea. All right, so this week, we just really have one quick win for you. So what we want you to do is we just want you to download Atlas and try a couple personal use cases. Nothing Nothing business-wise, nothing super confidential or, potentially sensitive.
Pretend you're booking a flight. Pretend you're booking a flight and see how you get on with that.
Or you're like planning an afternoon with your friends on the weekend and you want to do an outside activity, something very innocuous, just to start get a feel for it and the experience. And, spend, I would say, 10 to 15 minutes just watching it kind of interact. It'll start to get you familiar and thinking about how this can work and maybe where we're headed, and potentially might have some ideas for your business about how you might adjust your website, your content strategy, etc.
Love it. Quick and easy. Mm-hmm. Right. Let's wrap this up for the week.
So if you found this episode useful, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at hello@earlyadoptr.ai. Remember, no E in the adopter. Mm-hmm. Send us your Atlas experiences, any questions you may have. This is obviously very new, so there's not a lot on it just yet. Or just come and say hi.
And as a reminder, we are also on TikTok, Instagram, and LinkedIn at early_adopter, no E in adopter. And you can come and find us there as well.
Yeah. So next week, we're going to dive into conversational commerce, especially because that, holiday season is coming. We got to get ready for
the
Black
biggest
Friday
time of year for e-com and retail. Yep.
100%. So we're going to prepare you for that and, help you out with anything you need to purchase.
Right. So that should be a good one. So thank you for listening to Early Adopter, where we help make AI your unfair advantage.
Until next time. See you, Jess.
Thanks, Kyle. Bye.